it's Tom here, and it's another episode of Talking WoW, and I am joined by my co-host, who's usually here, Marty. Hey, Marty.
Hello, Tom. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, and here we are, talking today about why Wrath of the Lich King was the best expansion ever.
Whoa.
Or was it?
Was it? Yes, it was. But was it?
It was. Okay, that's the end of today's episode. Thank you very much. I'm glad we had that really in-depth conversation. And no, we are talking about why Wrath of the Lich King was the best expansion ever, because it was, Marty. It was, and it's even backed up by statistics, actual real-life data that said that World of Warcraft had its most subscribers during this expansion. So it's not just an opinion that I have right now, or that you maybe have right now. You seem a bit uncertain of your opinion on that, but I am definitely of the mindset that Wrath of the Lich King was the best expansion ever. And if you're somewhat in agreement, maybe we can talk about why that was the case.
I mean, I think there were a lot of good expansions. There's also been quite a few not so good ones, but I would definitely say
that's a very politician answer, isn't it? You know, there were some good ones and not so good ones. Not naming any of them, just saying that.
But Wrath of the Lich King definitely for me is up there. Is potentially the best expansion for me.
And I've been thinking about this a lot because it is just sort of a comment people have that this was the best expansion ever, Wrath of the Lich King, just in case you hadn't picked that up yet. But when you sort of break it down into the parts of the expansion, and I'm not even just talking about the expansion itself, but I'm talking about all the sort of moving parts that made the expansion overall. You had the announcement cinematic, which still I think is regarded as like one of the best expansion cinematics. You've got Arthas raising his undead in the lands of Icecrown Citadel. You've got his father giving him like advice from when he wasn't the Lich King. And I mean, Marty, just it's the hairs on the back of your neck standing up right now, just me even mentioning that, because mine are starting to raise just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, Blizzard and cinematics, it's always good. But specifically for this one, I think because it tied into so much, history of, the Warcraft universe as well. So, just looking back at Warcraft 3, for instance, where Arthas is one of the main characters as well, all of a sudden seeing them in, a proper cinematic, and wow, yeah, great.
There was that expectation, wasn't there? Because when you thought of Warcraft at that time, you were still thinking of Arthas, you were still thinking of the Lich King, you were still thinking this is something that needs to be resolved. When World of Warcraft first came out, people were basically saying like, where's the Frozen Throne? Like, let's go there. Let's sort this out. Let's see the Lich King, because that was such a big part of Warcraft 3. And everyone had this expectation, I think, as well, which I think just sort of confirms that this expansion really did hit the mark, because people had high expectations of the story and the characters already. It wasn't just some fresh threat that had been written into the game. It was something that people knew about. Some people maybe not, because they didn't play Warcraft 3, but generally, even myself, who wasn't a Warcraft 3 player, I had heard about the Lich King, I'd heard about the Frozen Throne, just from, hearing people playing about it, and it got me very excited about it. So I didn't even have that initial connection with the game.
I also think one thing that they did so well, and I know that some people have been complaining about it, but I really thought that they should go back and do things more like this again, is that Arthas, or the Lich King, had something, were involved with everything that happened in all the zones, and he made appearances, and he was being a dick, all the way through. So you knew who he was. You knew that he was, the big baddie, and he was just being annoying, and sure, you had that. Some people had that tie-in to, as I said, to past events in Warcraft 3, and so I would just love to see something similar, if going forward away from Wrath of the Lich King, for instance. I know that I'm getting a little bit off topic, but I would love to see, in future expansions, that they did this again, where they're building a character up over multiple, longer time, not just, not just the jailer type that comes in and do stuff and then he's gone again at the end of the expansion and nobody understood why. Where I think that's what they did so well here. They had this character that had a clear purpose, and they just managed to tell that story throughout the zones as well. So even though you weren't into the lore, you understood the stakes.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the big things is as soon as you set foot in Northrend for the first time, and again, another reason why this expansion was so great was riding that boat into the Howling Fjord. I don't think anything has been that good at the start of an expansion. Just the music kicks in, you're rolling up this fjord in this boat, and it feels very magical, and you don't really know what to expect. And I think everyone sort of has that sort of stored in their heart.
Not me. I went to Borean Tundra.
Boring Tundra, yes. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you didn't have the perfect start to your expansion. I actually quite liked Borean Tundra as well. I thought it actually captured the essence of what the Lich King was doing. It was like the ground zero almost of, oh, there's undead forces running around here, and I think you even see Kel'Thuzad when you're rolling into Borean Tundra as well. So that was kind of like, oh, hey, it's that guy, and I think Borean Tundra gets a bit of a bad rap, and Howling Fjord, I mean, is better, but I still think it was a decent starting zone.
Howling Fjord is so difficult to get around in compared to Borean Tundra. I really always preferred Borean Tundra, to be fair. I know that that's a lot of love for the other one, but I think in this case, I'm different. I really liked my path through it. Quests were made way much easier to way more accessible. I just like that way better.
I mean, the Tuskar were there as well, I suppose. So that's maybe that's what you're hinting at, that the Tuskar needed your help there. Very important that you did that. But somebody has to like Borean Tundra. It's Marty, everyone. But back to your point about the Lich King showing up, I think that is a really good point, because that, for me, really made me excited about when we were going to fight the Lich King. Like you say, he kept showing up. He was like, you were doing a quest, he showed up, and I don't know, I was almost like, hey, can I get your autograph kind of thing, because it was just like, that's kind of maybe not what you want to be capturing, but at the same time, it was like, there he is. Oh shit! Like, there he is. He's here. What's he saying? And he was showing up in some dungeons. And I know, like you say, people were complaining. It's like, he's showing up too much. Like, come on, does this guy have a job? Does he actually have a job, or is he just at that stage of his career where he's just showing up everywhere and signing pictures? And is that where we're at with that? But I liked it, because it was just that constant reminder of, this is the bad guy, and he's weaving in and out of the story, and he's laying down little markers, and eventually, I mean, we find out when we fight the Lich King that it was all part of his plan. Mm-hmm. He was luring us in to Ice Crown Citadel. He was training us almost. He was trying to make us better, so that he could then kill us and raise us and then fight for him.
He actually had a proper plan, some might say, and he actually technically succeeded in his plan.
He did.
So, just if you want to compare him to like another big bad that had a grand plan as well, where it didn't go so well, we didn't really understand it. Again, showing shade at the jailer. I'm very sorry. But
sorry, I thought you were going to say Hogger, because that plan didn't work too well either.
That is true.
Back in Elwyn Forest there.
That is true. But no, I totally agree with you there that just following Arthur's round in the zones and just waiting for that encounter, and then realizing that, oh, holy, we actually went into his trap. We were not outsmarting him, he was outsmarting us.
Yeah, and I mean, the Ice Crown Citadel raid, very memorable raid for everyone who experienced it, and obviously now you can go back and experience that in the classic version of Warcraft as well. And I just remember that feeling of stepping in there for the first time. Like, it felt like this is really bad. Like, this is a den of evil, and also internally you were just like very excited to be there. And there was just a lot of flavor in that raid as well, because you have like Tyrion there, and the Lich King and him sort of have this battle early on in Wrath of the Lich King as well. If you leveled up a Death Knight, I believe it was in the Death Knight quest, where you end up at Light's Hope Chapel and you have a battle there, and the Lich King's there as well, and Tyrion's like, whoa, you're on holy ground, Arthas, you have no power here. And then suddenly you're back, the tables have turned, and you're in Arthas's patch now, and it's just, I don't know, you just had this sort of worry as well, and you have like Bolvar screaming in the distance when you enter the halls, and it's like, this is bad, like this is really bad, but this is what it's supposed to be. This is what like an end of expansion enemy is supposed to feel like. And you were just so invested. Like, I think most people were just so invested in that story and how it was going to play out, because again, like we mentioned, this wasn't just a one expansion thing. This had crossed over from a previous game, and there was many years and years before we would actually come face to face with Arthas in the Frozen Throne. Like we mentioned, that expectation there, it was massive. Like, it was so high, and I think it delivered. Like, that final fight with Arthas, you're having this fight in the Frozen Throne, and half the platform gets burnt away or melted away, and it's just such an epic scene as well.
Just a fun little fact as well. That fight for me was also sort of difficult, and this was the first fight where I actually installed an add-on that you wouldn't raid without today. So it was the first encounter where I actually used a raid assist add-on.
See, that's how powerful the Lich King was.
Exactly.
He was making people download add-ons.
First fight with deadly boss mods, because I simply I needed those timers, because that the file, if you were standing in that, raid's over. Might as well just jump over the edge yourself.
You're joining Arthas' army, basically.
Yeah. So
if you don't get that right,
I don't know. It's probably not that difficult in today's standards, but I remember back then that was not an easy fight, and it was fun.
No, it was. And then the payoff at the end, when the Lich King is finally defeated, and you have the exchange between Tyrion and Bolvar discussing who's going to be the next Lich King. It's like one of those TV shows like Azeroth's next Lich King. Who's it going to be? Oh, who's it going to be? And they have this... they have this really passionate conversation about it. But it's not really a conversation. It's more of a, hey, I'm going to do it. No, fuck you, I'm doing it. Because, like, I'm a molten man. You've got some other destiny to fulfill. And it's like, oh, man, right in the fields. And the expansion, in almost the same place you've still got a Lich King. Because there must always be a Lich King to a certain point in Warcraft's history. Until there's not. At the time, we were like, oh my god, like, Bolvar's taken up this mantle and we've got to forget about him, because that's what he told us to do. And, well, I'm sure as heck going to do it. Right after I head to the Ruby Sanctum, which they've tacked on to the end of this expansion, which actually in the notes it says not to mention that, because, okay, we won't do that. But other raids in Wrath of the Lich King, we started off with Naxxramas, which... Again, some people are going to go, rehash, because this was a raid that was in Classic WoW, but nobody saw it.
So little people actually got to it, because it was definitely one of the harder ones as well. And before that, we had a few raids where one of them especially was like a guild killer that killed a lot of guilds because of sheer difficulty. And I guess raiding was just not as big as a thing either as it is today, for instance. So for someone like me who never got that far in Classic, for instance, I thought it was cool to actually go into Naxxramas and have a look around and see what's going on in there, and thematically it makes good sense.
No, it did. It made so much sense, and it fit in perfectly. And also, it wasn't too difficult of a raid. They'd obviously tuned it right down to be like an opening raid. And I think that sort of, I don't know, for me it sort of kicked off the feel-good factor of like, hey, I'm in this undead floating necropolis, and I'm taking care of all these undead, and I'm getting some pretty cool loot and aesthetic to sort of make me fit in for this expansion as well. And getting to see a raid that so many of us didn't get to see, and that's a real shame. And then from there we moved on to, I gotta say it, probably the best raid that's ever been put into this game.
Yeah, it was decent.
Ulduar. And I'm not saying it just from the best from the encounters. Well, maybe I am, because I just feel like every encounter in that raid just seems so well thought out, to the fact that there was just so many layers to it. Before we had this difficulty system with our raids and such, like, that was basically implemented or triggered through how you dealt with an encounter. So
hard mode, baby.
Hard mode. So basically there was it Mimram, the sort of mechanical titan, and they had like a big button basically that said do not push, don't push it. People did, but it initiated like a hard version of the encounter, and sometimes there was other ways to trigger these harder versions of the encounter, but it happened during the encounter, so you had to basically do something during that to enable it. And my mind was like, whoa, that's so clever. Like, that takes a lot more thought and probably a heck of a lot more time. And maybe that's sort of why we don't have it anymore, because they were like, this just takes too much time. Like, it's probably easier just to have a difficulty switch, which we have now.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people want something like this back, and to be fair, there have been instances where we have gotten similar things back, but not in a raid setting. I mean, we've gotten like the Mega Dungeon from BFA, the Mega Gnome Dungeon. That one actually did have hard modes where you would trigger similarity to this, and I think people really enjoyed it. I never got around to do them myself, so I haven't really tried them out, but apparently they are still, even though we are a little bit higher level now, they're still quite difficult to do. You still need a few people to do them even today, even though it's a few expansions ago. So it's not something Blizzard have forgotten. They're still putting in where it makes sense, but we haven't seen it in a raid sense.
Yeah, but overall, I think just the care taken with Ulduar, and it still feels magical going back to that now, even as a totally over-leveled character, breaking through those walls into this sort of ancient Titan complex. And there's threads there that are still meaningful even in current Warcraft today, because we have that undercurrent, don't we? And it just fit in so well into this expansion, which again was predominantly dominated by the Lich King, but you had this element in here that it gave you a little break from the Lich King threat and sort of reminded you of otherworldly threats as well with regards to the Titans, because it all leads back to them eventually.
Yeah.
It didn't feel out of place. It didn't feel like, hang on, this should be in another expansion. Like, you had Yogg Saron at the end just waving his tentacles about going, ha, fooled ya. And it was just so good, sort of really refreshing, as then we turned our attentions to the mighty Trial of the Crusader, where we had to fight with the Horde, obviously, right on the Lich King's doorstep, as we flexed and decided who was worthy enough to go fight the Lich King. And that raid itself also got a bit of flack, didn't it? Because it was like, oh, does this feel a bit out of place? And I think at the time it felt like it did, but looking back, I actually think I get it. I get it from a fantasy point of view. Like, I mean, now I'm saying it out loud, it sounds stupid, but let's host a tournament several miles away from the greatest threat of Azeroth and beat the living shit out of each other, and then go fight the Lich King. Maybe we could have skipped that part. Yeah. But I still enjoyed that. I still enjoyed, like...
I was about to say, yeah, that it did get a bit of a flag, and maybe it was a little bit, weird, an odd choice to have it right there. But Again, I actually kind of enjoyed both the dungeon and the raid in there. It was a good raid. It was some good encounters, so I really enjoyed it. Just from a mechanical gameplay point of view, but yeah, story-wise, it could potentially be a little bit questionable.
Yeah, and then you had some sort of intruder called the Black Knight or something, wasn't it? And it's like, oh, who's this? Arthas from Wish or something like that. I don't know who that guy was showing up, but did he have some sort of bigger role? It just feels very insignificant now. They can't even remember. So there we go. That's my point. And the main character was the Lich King. Obviously, the main character was the Lich King, and I'd mentioned, well, Death Knights, and I think that was another reason why this expansion probably was the best, because we had the introduction of hero class, which, ooh, that sounds really epic and really, really cool. And it was. I remember so many people switching over to Death Knights during Wrath of the Lich King. I was one of them. And I remember that starter zone for the Death Knights where you start off as a bad person. Let's just put it like that. You're killing innocents and you're spreading your death and decay. And it felt great, didn't it? It just felt great starting off as a bad guy and being like, oh, look at me, I'm so powerful, because Death Knights were ridiculously powerful, obviously, like all new classes that come into the game. And you were just raising this terror, and you felt connected to that straight away. It kind of gave you the perspective of like, oh, this is what like the Death Knights are doing. This is what the Lich King wants you to be doing. And then you have some redemption, and you go to your home city. If you're Horde or Alliance, you get some rotten fruit and vegetables thrown at you, and then everything's fine. I just think those intro quests were just really good, and they really just connected you to the Death Knight class straight away. And then probably the weirdest thing was, and I don't know if you remember this, Marty, so you got all the Death Knight starter stuff done, and then you were like, okay, let's head over to Northrend. I'm ready. I'm ready for your Lich King. No, you're not high enough. You gotta f*** off to the Outlands and kill some demons for a while. You gotta go solo, or not solo. You gotta go grip up with 4 other Death Knights and do Hellfire Ramparts and absolutely be in awe of how you could have 5 DPS classes beat dungeons. And that was a real disconnect, and I think they got that wrong. They should have had it that you were ready to step into Icecrown as soon as you were like done with the starter stuff with the Death Knight. And I think they've since not made that mistake with other hero classes.
With the Evoker, you're basically when you're done leveling, you are at them, you're back, you are ready to go straight into the newest expansion. So that was definitely a welcoming change, because that was, as you said, a huge disconnect with being like, oh, I'm playing, Wrath of the Lich King, I'm a Death Knight, and now I'm going back in time? How does this work?
Don't mess with time travel. Well, we did that later. But anyway, that's a different episode.
I think for me, there's a lot of personal feelings involved with it as well, because I took over our guild as a guild leader and brought us safely, sort of almost, through the whole expansion, and we managed. It's one of the few expansions where we as a guild, cleared everything. So that's definitely more like some personal achievement attached to this expansion as well, that definitely adds onto the whole, oh, this expansion feels so good to me. So that's why I'm like, I'm not completely sure if I feel like it is the best expansion ever, but it's definitely high up there, maybe competing with a few others. If you really need to pick out a favorite, I think I would have a little bit difficulty with that. But no, I agree. Top tier expansion. Let's just put it that way.
Do you agree with what me and Marty are saying in our points? Was Wrath of the Lich King the best expansion ever? Because obviously that is just, well, it's just my opinion. I told Marty that was my opinion. I'm still not sure if Marty thinks it was the best expansion ever, but I think we can all agree it was an amazing expansion. It had its flaws, just like everything, but overall it really captured what Warcraft was about. And I think for most World of Warcraft players, they will always look back fondly in their hearts of Wrath of the Lich King.
Did you enjoy this episode of Talking WoW? If so why not drop a review on your podcast catcher of choice? Personally, I thought it was terrible. But if you want more Talking WoW, you can follow these damn souls on Twitter or YouTube over at Talking WoW. Frostmourne hungers, baby.